Welcome to Kathy on the Couch, the EMDR podcast for everyday clinicians. I am your host, Kathy Couch. And this season, we have a new co host, Tony Parmenter. We're so excited to have Tony on our podcast. My mission is to support clinicians with critical conversations and resources about EMDR, therapy, and business practices. In each episode, we will feature insightful conversations with experts in the field of EMDR therapy, from therapists to others who've personally undergone EMDR therapy or those who are just on their journey to building a thriving private practice. Welcome. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it a like in the App Store so we can continue promoting meaningful content for your EMDR experiences. We will move on and introduce our guest for today's episode. Welcome to Kathy on the Couch, the EMDR podcast for everyday clinicians. I am your host, Kathy Couch. And this season, we have a new co host, Tony Parmenter. We're so excited to have Tony on our podcast. I am the owner of Rewired 360 and Willow Creek Counseling, where I provide EMDR and couples intensives and train therapists in the neurobiology of adaptive memory with EMDR therapy. My mission is to support clinicians with critical conversations and resources about EMDR, therapy, and business practices. In each episode, we will feature insightful conversations with experts in the field of EMDR therapy, from therapists to others who've personally undergone EMDR therapy or those who are just on their journey to building a thriving private practice. Welcome. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it a like in the App Store so we can continue promoting meaningful content for your EMDR experiences. We will move on and introduce our guest for today's episode. Okay, so continuing bonds for grievers, we're going to go through and look at how holiday traditions shape our view and help mourners, ways we can help mourners go through experiences that we can have in regards to grieving and helping those who are grieving. So we're going to be looking at how holiday traditions can help with those continuing bonds.
The continuing bonds theory was done to signify that there is the relationship, or a person may die, but the relationship continues. A bond, there can still be a bond with a deceased loved one, even again beyond like death, which was not recognized in early grief theory. So then continuing bonds, it refers to the meaningful connections we maintain with deceased loved ones, allowing us to integrate their memories and loved ones into our everyday lives. So again, that's especially for the holidays, bringing a deceased loved one into the holidays. And that's what we're going to be talking more about tonight. And then noting that psychological importance from a psychological perspective, continuing bonds helps individuals process grief. So it's considered adaptive and not maladaptive. It provides a sense of comfort and ongoing connection during significant life events, especially during the holidays. So we're going to talk more in this training about what that could look like during the holidays.
Stephanie and I kind of began this theory as we were going through all of our trainings and continuing bonds. It's this way where we're looking at how things are becoming adaptive, and we're developing a model as EMDR therapists where we can use the adaptive information processing to help people know that, teach about the processing that can occur with bonds and make it adaptive, and how do holidays, we build holidays in as self-soothing to be able to help us maintain those connections and the sense of comfort. So this is also an attachment theory, because we know that holidays can intensify feelings of loss. We're looking at how traditions offer this pathway to healing and memory work, and then create new rituals, both past and present. So continuing bonds refers to this. It's an actual theory, and it refers to the meaningful connections that we have with loved ones that are actually physically present, and we integrate their memories and love into our lives through rituals, ways that we bond with them. We're honoring them both past and present to provide comfort, continuity, and help reflect any changes that have occurred. So, continuing bonds theory shares that maintaining an ongoing connection with the deceased is normal, and it's an adaptive aspect of bereavement, challenging earlier models that emphasized detachment. And I can't remember which theorist introduced this theory. Do you remember, Stephanie?
Klaus and Nickman.
Okay. So that's referenced here in 1996. And so some of our other trainings, we go through that timeline in regards to grief. Defining relationships with deceased loved ones during the holidays. Continuing bonds manifest through memories, rituals, sensory experiences, communications, and spiritual beliefs. So with clients, encouraging them to look to see what is already present in their life that is adaptive, things they're already doing for validation, ways that they can or other people connect with the departed. Is it through prayer rituals? Is it through eating their favorite meal? Is it through holiday cards? Those kinds of things. So we look at this attachment and constructivist framework, emphasizing the transformation of the relationship and reconstructing the meaning and identity after the loss. So we're going to talk about how do we create new traditions. We're going to look at personal reflections and then practical tips and give you some tools for working with grievers here. So we did go through some information that continuing bonds is not pathological. It's not talking to the deceased. To the deceased in your own way is an adaptive form of coping, depending on the nature and interpretation of the bond. As we look at some of the questions out there, when does grief become complex? And some of the diagnosis with persistent complex bereavement disorder. How do we continue to help people through this in an adaptive way? So we know that family traditions come in all sizes, from funny birthday customs to New Year rituals to daily routines, bringing coffee, petting dogs, just creating traditions to create strong, loving bonds and letting you know you can still have that emotional expression. So Freud said you're ceasing emotional expression when the person passes. All that emotional investment should end. And we're saying actually it can continue in a relational way and it can provide a sense of belonging and comfort.
It could, where we're bringing in the concept of reflective gratitude, where we're expressing gratitude for loved ones, and it could be through journaling, letters, overtly by discussing positive memories and loved ones' attributes. So it's that during the holidays when your family is sitting around the table, or they might be hopefully volunteering to help you clean up, which I hope they'll be doing in my household. But it's sitting, talking about even bringing, oh, remember when grandma did this, or that was so funny when your brother did that, or you remember this holiday memory. I'm so glad we had that time together. So that could be an example of reflective gratitude. Journaling, writing letters to your deceased loved one can also be considered reflective gratitude. So I've had clients definitely continuing bonds in the first sessions when they're raw and in acute grief, that it's hard for them to understand the concept. So some of the time, or in the beginning, after a recent death, our clients might not be ready to do that. Or of course they might be riding the waves of feelings of anger, sadness, grief, frustration. They might still be in shock and disbelief. So they may not be ready to talk about continuing bonds yet, but we can still plant the seed. I had a client I met with actually today who experienced the death of a child. It was a year ago, last year. And there was a lot of shock, and my client coming into sessions and saying, we talked a little bit about continuing bonds, and she was, oh, this doesn't make sense right now. But a year later, now I remember what you said about continuing bonds, and I think I'm ready to talk about that more. So even if somebody is in more an acute grief this holiday season, we can still plant the seed in our assessment or our intakes, or when we're doing our biopsychosocials. We can extend curiosity to how do you want to honor and continue to connect with your loved one, knowing that this happens over time and they may not have an idea right now, but we're introducing that concept. Is there anything you already do to honor the memory of someone you love that is no longer in your life? And could that help you during this holiday season, or would that you want to honor your deceased loved one in that way this holiday season? Do you have a day of the year that you're reminded of your loss the most? For a lot of people, it is the holidays. What did you learn about loss growing up? We're exploring if that was something that you were able to express feelings about loss, talk about it, or were things pushed down or suppressed. And in our work together now, is it time to not push this down anymore and talk about this more openly? In general, how do you honor things and people who have left you in your life? Are there any rituals of connection that you want to plan for holidays, birthdays, special occasions? Do you prefer to honor your loved one internally and think about them or express gratitude internally, or when the sun rises in the morning, you think of them? Or is it something more externally that you want to do with a ritual or establishing a tradition?
That's a really good way. I think these assessment questions will be uploaded on your portal, so you'll have the slides at the end as well. I love this. This is the Kurt Cobain Memorial Bench, and it's in Seattle, and people have dropped trinkets, anything that reminded them of him. Here, a client actually went there just last year and took things that they wanted to gift him. It's just a way that you can continue to honor people that have passed. When we work on memory, continuing bonds can be nurtured through talking to loved ones about those shared experiences, keeping cherished photos visible, sharing stories during family gatherings. And these practices foster connection and honor those lives of those. So when we're looking at these ideas of memories, we're creating all of those things that are positive and adaptive and helping encourage people to continue those to be alive in their home, even if they can't verbalize what's happening. It's a way that connection can still happen there. So, traditions with grief, sources of comfort in regards to traditions, which means something that you do over and over. So, life changes, and so do family dynamics. And so, new rituals can blend old memories with new experiences. As you have new traditions, you might experience some disruption of familiar comfort. And so, ideas for new traditions, we'll talk a little bit about in the future slides here, but we're adjusting to reflect those new dynamics and incorporation of those things that can become adaptive and create space for healing. Every year, grandma used to make this dish. She's not here anymore. What can we do? So it's both and instead of either or. Do you want to do this one, Steph?
So, like Kathy says, continuing bonds, it could be rituals that create connection and remembrance during the holidays. It could be that you're using, I know for Christmas Eve, I'm going to be using at the table china that was passed down all the way from my great grandmother. It's going to be on the table for the holidays. So that's a way to continue the bond with all the way back up to my great grandmother. And then there's silverware for my grandmother and items on the table that remind me of like my mom and my brother. So when I set the table, I think of them. It could be incorporating a favorite meal too, lighting a candle, putting a favorite ornament on a tree. I had a client, a young client, who the way that they continue their bond with a sister, a younger sister that died, was each of them make an ornament every year that reminds them, or they buy one and put the ornament on the tree that reminds them of Sissy. This is something a 5-year-old already got the concept of continuing bonds, and he's like, this is something we're going to do every year for Sissy. So that's an example from a very intelligent 5-year-old of how to honor his sister.
Well, I work with a children's grief program here in Mountain Twin Falls, Idaho, and they have an ornament making memorial for anybody that wants to make an ornament for anyone that passed. So, this is the idea we could hold two things together, celebration and grief. And so, we're creating space for whatever emotions come, and this idea of emotional maturity, being able to understand emotions, the emotions can come and go, nothing's permanent. And maybe this year we might do ornaments, and then maybe next year we might go, let's do something different, such as cookies. So just remembering things can change over time, and looking at those shared rituals to help continue that bond and that external behavior. We can also engage in things, encourage clients to do things like acts of kindness, acts of service, donating in a loved one's name, or dedicating a time to share favorite stories or lessons that they learned from that person. That one's a fun one. Cherish belongings and rituals so we can display cherished belongings, visit meaningful places, set a place at the table that are practical strategies for maintaining bonds. So at my wedding, my husband's dad passed. And so I had a little plaque made that went in his chair at the wedding. And so that was something that we did to continue that. Cultural or religious rituals. We talked about lighting candles, writing letters. Anything collective is powerful. Collective ceremonies, groups involved in a certain ritual to help people's memories reaffirm connections during holidays. And so that's from David Kessler in Rios and Valero. And David Kessler talks about the sixth stage of grief in his work is meaning making. And so that's what we're doing, is creating a foundation for meaning here, adapting life with these new rituals, but also looking at future moments. So in the AIP model, it's those future moments, fostering a sense of continuity among this transition can be helpful. And then blending memories. So this idea of the blending past and future together to create a new perspective and celebrate loved ones while forming these new connections and contributing to healing and growth during those difficult times so that the loss isn't so apparent can also be helpful, is the skill here. And so here we have our ornaments that we've been talking about, writing the name of the deceased on baby and child artwork, holiday cards, ornaments, consideration of the siblings and sibling loss. What does that mean? It's different than a parental loss. And so asking them if there's anything specific that they would like to do for that specific sibling. And I'll let Stephanie talk about this one, the reproductive story and visualization of baby or babies into a holiday narrative, since that's her area.
So I have a lot of clients. I'm a maternal and reproductive mental health specialist. So I meet with a lot of clients who they did experience a second trimester pregnancy loss or a stillbirth or had a neonatal loss. So it's introducing that concept of continuing bonds. I have a lot of clients that call this the littles, acknowledging that these were the littles you weren't able to make the memories that you wanted to. So I've had clients that bring in their baby, they'll write their baby's name. They drew the name in a picture that another child created. The butterfly might be a symbol to signify the deceased child in drawings and cards. The family members know that that's there. They can make an ornament. I had another family that hung a little stocking on their mantle of a baby that died in utero, very close to full term, to honor their baby. It's a tiny stocking that they use. You can have stockings made. Etsy has many people who specialize in making lost items, and they would make a stocking. Again, that consideration of bringing in the sibling role. How do you want to honor your sibling? Do you want to draw a picture, write a letter, make them an ornament? And then we're also during the holidays validating that the reproductive story or the story they envisioned during the holidays, if it was having twins and you're having the holiday with a surviving twin, if thinking of the twin that died, or you expected your baby to be here now and this was supposed to be your first Christmas all as a family. We are validating that. And for a lot of clients, rather than being flooded, a lot of clients that is comforting to talk about like what they visualized, if it was like presents under the tree for their baby or children playing together. For some of our clients, that can actually be comforting and not flooding. Like I had a client that there was twins and one died in utero, and it was comforting for her to say like, yeah, I did picture presents for both of them or that they'd be both be here this Christmas. And it was bringing still bringing that baby into present day life and talking about them and honoring them.
Mhm. And then there is this idea of absorption. I had a client who kind of absorbed her siblings part of their embryo, and so she had this idea of I took all of the surviving life from my sibling, even though we never knew the sibling, and so looking at that meaning that they're making from that is important too. So looking at storytelling, memory telling, you can have memory ornaments. Remember that one year in 1985 when it was so snowy? My daughter was born when we had this really bad snow year in Idaho, and we were like literally digging our car out of the parking lot. And so, we have some of those memories there. You can make decorations representing their memories, acts of kindness, volunteering or giving back in their honor, or reflecting, just having that shared communal storytelling. It's really fun, or memory telling, because everybody remembers, we know everybody remembers everything different. And so creating some of that narrative generational bond or legacy, I guess is what I would say, can be a way that we can do that in a way that can help them with that. Do you want to do this one, Steph?
Yeah, so with continuing bonds, they can be flexible, they're individualized with traditions. With our clients, they can do, if you do something this year, you can, of course, switch it up next year. You can ask family members what you want to do this holiday season to honor your loved ones and get some ideas. You're tailoring rituals to your individual, the family's needs and individual needs, incorporating diverse family dynamics, creating space for personal expression. For some people, it's easier. It might be, let's establish a scholarship in their name or give. My older daughter does Minithon then, which is a cancer related charity, and she's gotten a lot of donations for people that's the way they're choosing this holiday season to honor their loved ones. So for some people that might feel it fits better for them, or giving to the Heart Association rather than doing something, they're eating their loved one's favorite meal or using dishware, that may not feel okay for them. So it's flexible, it's individualized to their relationship with their loved one. Intentional adaptation of routines, creating new holiday traditions, or modifying existing ones provides comfort and connection. I have a client that her brother died almost a year ago. They would meet up during the holidays and drive from house to house together, visiting relatives. And this year, she asked another family member to do with her in honor of her brother, to do it with her, to still keep and think of her brother while she was going visiting from house to house with her uncle, and still bringing him into the day and still having that tradition. And our strategies for continuing bonds, they foster resilience. So it's not how some of the time people might say, oh, you're not over them yet, or are you okay because you keep talking about them on the holidays? We know that continuing bonds and having rituals and honoring is adaptive, and it can help provide comfort during the meaning making process in the holiday season as well. And then that adaptive potential of continuing bonds, and reflect on cherished holiday experiences together. We know Kenneth Doka said that ongoing inner relationships provide comfort, continuity, and resilience. So again, keeping your loved one in mind, bringing them into the holidays, it creates comfort. Again, it helps provide comfort during the grief process. Ritualized behaviors allow survivors to maintain, adapt, or even relinquish bonds depending on their needs. Then for some of our clients, it might be releasing something that you did do during the holidays and starting something new. And continuing bonds theory supports meaning making and identity reconstruction after loss.
We're looking at the idea that they can adapt in different ways, and the bonds can look different depending on the type of attachment: secure, anxious, avoidant. They can do it in whatever attachment style that they decide. So it's a very empowering way to say, however you're comfortable, here's some ideas of what people experience, what feels right for you. Or it can even be in a session doing art therapy with pictures or different kinds of things. They can bring in photos of their loved one and share their stories. I love doing that one. When we're looking at memory making, we're looking at the idea of significance of traditions and looking at how they're sharing their cherished memories together, discussing the significance of continuing these things. Why do we always do this at this certain time of year? Said, well, because this is what is connecting you to this person who did this, who did that, and encourage this open idea of dialogue in the right now. So we're holding the past, the present, and the future together, all in that one three-prong moment. So we have communication, encouraging family dialogue, self-care, validating mixed emotions and boundaries, support, importance of friends and professionals. So encouraging us to adjust the plans if needed, or all of these things in regards to how do we have support and what do we need to take care of ourselves in the holidays, and just being able to really honor in a way that feels good for us and them. Here's some quotes, Steph, if you want to read them.
We know grief is not linear. I know it doesn't always follow the stages of grief. Somebody could feel angry and then adjust and then have to go back to anger. Memories keep our remember continuing bonds and memories keep our loved ones alive. And even during our sessions, it helps clients because they might come in and talk about at first, this is how my loved one died, or this is what happened to them. But in our work together, we're the people that's comfortable with saying, can you bring your loved one alive for me? I want to know what they were like in life, and I want to know about your holiday traditions. And I really want to unpack together something that could resonate with you with continuing a bond. Even if this year you don't feel like you're up to it, maybe next year you will be then, and you'll remember our conversation. And when we share stories about loved one, it's we are healing together and we're comforting each other in that shared experience, which can help the grief process and make it a little more tolerable.
It's also sharing the story about how they lived, not always about how they passed, and maybe things that they did during their lifetime or other things that can help move forward their mission. So we're going to now turn the time over for us to have a discussion, for Stephanie and I to ask any questions or to offer strategies that you've all used in regards to working with grievers so that we can maybe help support you during the holidays in your work. And then we'll have some resources and some contact information. So what kind of strategies have you used in your work with grievers in ways that maybe you have found helpful? Okay. I think just for me, it's just acknowledging their emotions. We can get into this nostalgia and, these ideas of, living in that past prong, if you will say, but also just making sure that you're taking breaks for yourself as needed. We don't always have to be rooted in a story or in a tradition or experience. And then setting boundaries with the amount of time you're able to spend in this process. And what does your own grief bereavement journey look like? It can look like sharing support, resources, going to support groups, helping them identify those supports in the community, family members for them, and then being able to just discuss what does this meaning making era look like, and how are we going to derive meaning from this person that lived in their life's story there. Steph, what else would you like to say there?
For meaning making, too, it's not because I've had a lot of clients have questions about that, and it's not we're going to find meaning in someone's death, but it's like what meanings can we make in life now, and how can we continue the bond with our loved one in a way that honors them and then ourselves then in that relationship then. Because a death, like David Kessler says, that you may get a medical answer, or you might have a doctor report, or you might have some medical understanding, but it may never be a satisfying answer for you. So in our work together, we're working with clients on, again, talking about how do you want to bring it, you want to honor your loved one in a way where that reflects your relationship and then supports you in life too.
Can also be like with jewelry, wearing different kinds of jewelry, how they can feel close in nonverbal ways. So we're exploring verbal and nonverbal attachments. So ways we have behaviors, but we have nonverbal things. Maybe you wear perfume every, year this happens. So how are you encouraging them to look to see what traditions they want to establish as far as a ritual to bring themselves comfort? And then that meaning may shift over time. So it's like my grandmother taught me to never take anything for granted. Life is too short. And Stephanie talks a lot about the Gabby Petito Foundation. Gabby Petito was involved in a domestic violence relationship with a partner, and it ended in murder suicide. And so her family created a foundation and memorial for her. And so encouraging candlelight vigils and rituals, ways that we can continue. And a lot of people, even in the 9/11 experience, still come together and remember collectivist grief, support groups, those kinds of things for big tragedies. So that is a little bit more nuanced than, so we have this expected and unexpected death. And so we're looking at those variations on that there. And so in the holidays, we really kind of talk about memories and traditions and holidays. And so we're really trying to help figure out which is the right way to grieve and being able to help that way. What are some other things maybe that you've had as far as clients? We're here to help you now, kind of with anything maybe any questions that you have, or maybe things that you're doing that could be helpful. You can either say it or put it in the comments.
So I'm very believer in continuing bonds, etc. This was actually several years ago. I was still working in a hospice, and I was working with a client whose husband had died. Probably, I want to say September timeframe before the holidays. And she was from a very, very Italian. Both she and he were both very Italian, and they had very big, lavish holiday gatherings with specific food items and such. And as we approached the holiday, I was talking with her quite frequently about what was important to her in terms of honoring her husband. And she insisted absolutely that she was going to do everything exactly as she had always done, exactly the same food, exactly. And I was, okay, that sounds great. I mean, I think that if that's how you want to manage that, I think that's wonderful. And she's going to have her kids over and all this kind of stuff. So she came back after the holiday and she looked at me and she said, that's the last time I ever do that. But I wasn't going to tell her that may not make sense at this point, or you might want to think about something else, because that's how she wanted to do it. And she needed to do that in order to come to her own conclusion that moving forward, that might not work best for her, and maybe something scaled down or just really different, right?
Yeah, the idea of autonomy and self-determination. I think I have a client who's involved in a really big Basque community, so it's always involved with a large community gathering, and so there's always very relational experiences. And so we're looking at ways they can do that. I wanted to highlight what happens if that's the culture and then there's a death around the holidays, which is what's happening for this person now. So it was always very exciting. And now there's this also loss. So how do you cope with the loss around a holiday that was also so important? We have a comment. I work with clients directly after loss and not long term. So it's been helpful to think of ideas in the short term that they can look forward to. And just remembering, what can you do now to honor the present? Maybe it's the empty chair, the past, and maybe even the future of what they would want for themselves, and this idea of legacy, but also people have different capacities, and we might not be able to do something another family member could engage in, and also creating that different system, because families are systems. There's a different system and function every year. Sometimes people go to in-laws one year and outlaws the other year. And so you're trying to also encourage a bunch of family dynamics. So during the holidays specifically, finding out what's important to them, finding out their why behind the traditions is really important. And the continuing bonds theory is a relational attunement to this experience and being able to help kind of facilitate that. We have a couple of resources here. Stephanie and I are both certified thanatologists through the Association of Death Education and Counseling. In your slides, there's a matrix, a body of knowledge matrix that highlights a lot of the material we've been talking about. David Kessler is at grief.com, and you can find a lot of helpful videos. If you're an EMDR therapist and want to work with patients intensively, here's a little kit that you can work with that. Paul Denniston does grief yoga. And have you experienced that, Carol? Would you like to share about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I try to attend I've been through all of his trainings. I particularly was very fond of his chakra training that he did fairly recently, but it's just a really gentle movement that can be done sitting in a chair. And my idea around yoga is heck no, it's too big. But his stuff is so gentle in that way. And he's very encouraging of do as little or do as much as feels right for you.
Very
So
fun, like the tiger breath that you could just
yeah,
breathe and focusing on breath. And so don't let it scare you away. There's a series in Death and Dying, best practices on topics in the fields. There's the TAPS Institute that offers a free training for 5 CEUs on grief theory. And then they have What's Your Grief website to be able to help support grievers. Those are some books and online communities. Stephanie and I are always available to reach out for more information. I meet the recipients and give them a bio about my mother for a scholarship. That's a great way. And then continue talking about that in regards to legacy building and being able to kind of work with them to help remember those positive adaptive pieces because there is some difficult things in life that happen that aren't always there. So our big takeaways are ritualization, memory making, being creative around ways that you can create family traditions, verbalizing the memories, routines, being aware of life changes and dynamics, emotional, affective, and expression, the empty seat at the table or lighting a candle, sharing stories or looking through a photo album.
When we're introducing, and we talked about this earlier, a continuing bonds language, again, we are acknowledging that some people in acute grief or when they're still in shock and disbelief and anger, that might be hard for them to take in at first. Again, they might be like, oh, I'm just not ready to do that, or my brain can't go there yet. But we're planting that seed of what would or could a continuing bond look like over time, because our clients are, if you do work with people long term, they are going to remember a year from now that you mentioned this language, or a year and a half, or maybe 6 months, like, oh, I remember you used those words, continuing bonds, and I think I might be ready to talk about that a little more.
And that's a little bit different when we look for the grief theory. The 1996 theory came forward after a lot of stages and phase models where we're either having the restoration or the loss orientation. So we had this either or experience. We had a lot of tasks models with Rondo's work. Teresa Rondo also had the 6 R's. But prior to this continuing bonds in 1996, we had a lot of these task models, which I think can be helpful. This theory kind of talks about this overall relational aspect in regards to grief and how we experience grief and mourning in our practices. So we just wanted to hop on here for this holiday webinar. You can go online to your portal and gather your CEs. We have a lot of material coming up. We have some events coming up in continuing bonds and the adaptive information processing model. We have the EMDR therapy for navigating grief webinar and a lot of grief related topics. Stephanie will have her grief symposium next year and a lot of different trainings there. So that's kind of the basics of just really honoring those loved ones in a way that the patient's comfortable with and when they're ready. And even if you've reintroduced it and they have an aversion, reintroduce it and gently come back to it so that they are remembering that death ends a life, not a relationship, is the tenets of this theory. So I'll let Stephanie kind of take us out and let you know where to find us.
And then just on that, even for working with short-term clients, you can still introduce the concept of continuing bonds, and that's something they can talk about among their family members or friends or in a support group when they are ready. So we can still introduce the concept with short-term clients as well. My email is, I'll type it in the chat, is info@stephaniepiercetherapy.com. Kathy, your email is rewired.
At rewired360.com, we have a bunch of grief related resources. We're always talking about ways that we can work with grief. So we have traumatic death, death education, grief and loss assessment and intervention are some of the main areas that we work in. As far as what does it mean to be a thanatologist, we specialize in, and that word comes from Thanos, which is a Marvel word that talks about the art of death. Stephanie and I practice in lots of areas. We have our podcast, Kathy on the Couch, that has interviews with a death doula. So you can find us. If you have any questions, just let us know, and we'll be hosting more of these. If you have specific topics, please put that in your evaluation, and we're happy to do what you're asking for. Here's where you can find. Let me share this again. So we have a free resource library, a membership community, and a huddle. We have several EMDR and grief trainings. We have our podcast and then our subscription community where you get CEs monthly and an hour of EMDR group consultation and giveaways. So we're just happy to be here and happy to share all of our knowledge with you as far as thanatology and EMDR here. So just remember to complete your course evaluation, and we will see you again next time. Thank you, and we'll see you again. Take care.